The next conversation we have is going to be a very important one. We've got one of our board members, Kati, Iceva up here, and additionally, Alice Steinglass. The topic of this conversation, I think, is very relevant to what's going on both in the region but also globally as well. The concept is on the future of work. How do we prepare the nation to succeed and lead? So, Kati, nice. Thank you.
So thank you for joining us today for this spotlight chat with Alice. So we'll talk tech, future of jobs, how education can evolve to meet the needs of tomorrow's job, and what Macedonia can do now to prepare and lead in that future. So we're very fortunate to have Alice here with us today. Welcome, Alice.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
So a Harvard-educated tech veteran that has led software innovations in augmented reality, Xbox, Microsoft Office, and currently the president of Code.org, an organization that is very near and dear to my heart. So I'm going to start by asking you, how many of you have heard either of Code.org or their annual event, the Hour of Code? So you can just raise your hands.
I have.
Oh. So I see a few hands out there, but still a lot of people haven't heard, so I'm going to briefly tell you about it. So if you haven't heard, Code.org is an organization that makes the most popular computer science courses for kids. They have over 30 million students involved in their courses. And their annual event, the Hour of Code, is a global movement that's in about 180 countries. 180 countries. Alice, that's a lot of countries. So can you tell us, like you're working basically on CS education, on computer science education with 180 countries.
Yes.
Why are all these countries doing this? Why does this matter?
Yeah, you know what we hear. So this has been a sea change. Just in the last 6 years, 25 countries around the world have announced new plans to bring computer science education into their school systems. And what we see is, you know, a lot of the themes that you heard this morning. The world is changing. The workforce is changing. And countries are trying to figure out how to prepare for that changing workforce. You know, if, for example, in America, there are currently 3 million truck drivers. There are 3.3 million cashiers. Those jobs are jobs today, but people are looking forward and saying, what happens when we have self-driving cars? I was just reading an article about cashiers. Some of these fast food restaurants are replacing with the little screens, which you'd be like, oh, the screen, the little touch screen's not as good. Turns out people order more because they order dessert when they're ordering from a computer instead of a human.
You want to be seen?
I know. They're willing to order the ice cream. And so that's the sort of thing that companies are, you know, changing, and that's the sort of thing that countries are concerned about, right? It's not just about how do I think about the workforce today, it's where's that workforce going? Forrester did a prediction of what was going to happen, and they say that in the next the next 8 years, 16% of jobs will be automated. PricewaterhouseCoopers estimated that in 15 years, it's going to be 35%. McKinsey said it's going to be over 45%. I don't know which one of these is right, but I do know that there's real concern about how we prepare our students for that workforce of tomorrow. And it isn't just the jobs like driving a truck, it's also, you know, some of these higher paid jobs, like a radiologist, right? Stanford recently did this, some work with machine learning. They took publicly available radiology pictures, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, of pneumonia, and in just 1 month, their computers were able to outperform the human experts. They started in September. By November, they were outperforming. And that's concerning, and I think that's why these countries are trying to get ahead of it.
Yeah, so it sounds like, you know, as we hear this, we might think, oh my God, are we hearing bad news here? But, you know, is anything good coming with that? Are the new kinds of jobs becoming available? Yeah,
you know, these changes are always hard. Some people are calling this the fourth industrial revolution. And you know, like previous changes in the economy, there's both the loss, but there's also opportunity here. If we look back at America 100 years ago, 50% of the population in America was working on farms. 50%. Today, it's under 5%. And that doesn't mean that the other 45% are unemployed. The jobs have changed. The economy has changed. And that's something we don't just see in America, we see it around the world. And I think what's happening now is there's an opportunity to prepare the workforce for these new jobs, these jobs of the future. Just looking backward over the last 15 years, Brookings found that the number of highly digital jobs, more than tripled. The number of non-digital jobs is going down, but these new jobs, these jobs that are being created, they pay more, which is great. Yeah. They pay, the highly digital jobs paid more than twice as much as the non-digital jobs. We heard earlier today about Lithuania and Estonia that are investing in this future, and they're building new economies and new jobs around this changing economy. I think there's a real opportunity for that. The challenge is that if the workforce isn't prepared for that, it's hard to take advantage of it. So right now in America, there are, I have the number here, 480,000 open computing jobs in America. But last year, only 62,000 students graduated with computer science degrees. So there's this huge gap here where we're trying to figure out how do we take our students and prepare them for these jobs that are not only in the future, they exist right now and they're unfilled. And that's something we don't just see in America, we see that around the world.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that from what you're saying, it really reminds me of a quote of Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO. And when he talks about economic growth and productivity, he says that education plus innovation multiplied by the intense use of new technology is what over a long period of time creates productivity and economic growth.
Yeah. Okay, that's a fancy equation. But let me see if I got that. There's three pieces there that I think you can break down, right? There is education, which obviously I'm very passionate about, but I'll put that aside for now. Innovation and the intensity of tech use, all of those are really key to supporting this new digital economy. The Macedonian people are actually ahead on the intensity of tech use. We were looking up the stats. Did you know 79% of people here are connected to the internet? That's actually more than a lot of European countries. It's more than Portugal, Italy, Poland. So tech use, we've got tech use. And then the next piece you were talking about is innovation. And I actually think innovation and education are coupled very tightly together. I think you unlock creativity, you unlock innovation when you give students that opportunity to express themselves. What we find in a lot of schools around the world is that they're aware that digital is important. Mm-hmm. They're aware that computers are important. But they're not really, the teachers aren't fully equipped to teach students how to be creators on those computers. So instead what they're doing is teaching them how to be users of the computers. It's sort of like if our schools taught reading but not writing, right? Reading's important. Everybody should learn how to read. And if you teach all the students how to read, they can read history, they can read poetry, they can read the news. That's great. But imagine if our schools here didn't teach the students how to write. They would read somebody else's version of the history or the news, but you would never see the Macedonian history written or the Macedonian poetry. And I think that that's the hard part for schools, is to teach the students not only how to use the applications or use the internet, but how to be the creators of those applications, the technology, the internet, and that's really what we want to enable. And when you do, kids are amazing. They're very creative. My kid just made an app where you fight aliens, and if you get hit, he recorded his sister crying. Oh, okay. I didn't ask him how he got that recording, but he wanted to make it very authentic, right? So, that's kind of fun, but I think...
Ryan is in trouble.
Right, he is. But it's not just about the fun, it's about unleashing that economic opportunity. I just met Steve, okay, I got his name here, Anufsky. Steve Anufsky is going to be on this panel later today. And I think it's a perfect example of using technology and innovating to create new jobs right here. All of his engineers are graduated from Finky, and they're working here in Skopje. And they have built a company that allows labor to be more easily hired for conventions, for hotels. And that technology is being used other places. So they're selling that to America, but the innovation is happening here. And they've got engineers here that are able to build that. And that's the kind of innovation that I think we can create when you unlock the potential. But it's not just tech companies. This is actually one of those myths. People assume that the only reason to get a computer science degree is to work in tech. Actually, 2/3 of the jobs are not in tech. It is every other industry. You know, it is clothing companies that are looking at how to use data and machine learning and AI to innovate, to be able to do new things. It's retail, it's factories. So this is really about every industry.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think by now we're all convinced that we should be teaching computer science. I'm really wondering, like, how much should the schools teach? Like, should we all know how to, like, optimize SQL queries and build reliable distributed systems?
No. I think Kati needs to know that, because she actually runs an engineering team that is doing distributed real-time technology on SQL queries. But I actually don't know how to do that. And I've been able to do a lot in technology. You know, here's how I think about it. There is a base level of understanding technology, and it's more than coding. It's more than just being able to write code, that everybody should understand, because that's the world we live in. If I think about what I learned when I was in school, one of the things we all learn is biology. I am not a doctor. I am not a nurse. If you break something, Kati, don't ask me to fix it for you. But I did learn enough biology in school that I know I have a digestive system. I know I have bones and how they move. You know, if I go to the doctor and I say, hey, like, my foot hurts, and he's like, you pulled a tendon, I don't actually remember the difference between a tendon and a ligament. But it doesn't matter. I know that it's one of those things that connects the bones and muscles. And that's just being an educated human about this body that I'm going to live in my whole life. In the same way, when our kids go to school, they're going to be living with technology their whole life. They're going to have, you know, we have phones in our pocket today. They're connected to the internet. We have algorithms that are running so much of the world that we live in. You know, what school you go to, what job you get, the application for that job, what hours you work, the sourcing for the materials that are coming in, and then the entertainment you watch when you get home, right? This is the world they live in. And so what we try to do is make sure that kids have that foundational understanding of how that works. I want them to feel like, whether or not they go on to go make apps, I want them to understand how apps are made so they feel like they can do it. I want them to know what big data is. I want them to know what AI is. I want them to understand what the internet is and how computers work. And I want them to do that so that when they do have that clothing company, and they see that they're collecting this data, they can make that connection. Even if they're not the one who's going to build that software, I want them to recognize the problems that software can solve, and I want them to understand how they can use technology to solve those problems, to be able to do that innovation that we talked about earlier.
That makes a lot of sense. And honestly, you know, it doesn't really sound that controversial, and I think that, you know, early on we said that you're working with 180 countries.
Yes.
And even in Macedonia, as part of the curriculum, like, informatics and computer science is there. So I think that the countries are realizing this is what needs to be done. Mm-hmm. But I think the next question is, how do you really make that effective? Like, how do you really make it work? And what might be getting in the way of it? Like, why are we not seeing that wonderful success yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really fascinating. It is non-controversial, right? Everybody, it's one of those subjects that people want to see happen, right?
Everybody agrees. Yeah.
Everybody agrees.
Ask, I don't know.
Yeah, so we did a study. Mm-hmm. It turned out that, actually, this was not our study. 9 out of 10 parents want their kids to learn computer science. I'm a mom. I definitely want my kids to learn computer science. How many parents here want their kids to learn this? Yeah, we got some support here, right? And kids love it. Kids, you know, when you offer the courses, they love create. And who doesn't want to create apps and make things? So then you're like, well, why is it that most schools in the world don't teach this? And actually, the schools here are ahead, right? That it's part of the curriculum. There are two challenges. One, we see schools that don't teach it. And the other part is we see schools that teach it, but don't really know how to teach it. And the biggest blocker that we see is teacher preparation, right? If you think about this, the teachers that are in the schools today, they didn't learn this for the most part when they went to school. And even if they did learn it, it's a fast-moving subject, right? So, they probably didn't learn about AI and machine learning because most people didn't learn about AI and machine learning, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It was invented in the 1960s, but it wasn't in practical use until recently. And so we're asking teachers to teach a subject that they didn't get to learn. And that's a barrier, and that's a real barrier. And so that's been the focus of our work, is to support the schools to teach this new subject.
Yeah, so when we chatted earlier, you mentioned that you have worked with like 100,000 teachers around the world and reached them through different developmental programs.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to learn, like, what is the support they need? Like, what is that can be done to support these teachers and to train them?
Yeah, so we do 3 things to support teachers. The first is we create curriculum. Teachers need support to understand what should they be teaching, how do they teach it, what does success look like, what is the order in which I would teach these concepts. Our curriculum is free and no cost. We're a nonprofit, so we give that away. We also make tools. And that's something that's also important in the classroom, to support the teachers to be able to have learning environments that are designed for teachers. And we make that available as well as an open source product, and it's available around the world. And then the third thing we do is teacher training. And I think that's really important and often underestimated. Teachers need support. They need training. They need workshops to be able to do this. Imagine you're in front of 30 kids who probably know how to use technology better than you. That is scary. That's scary. It's even scarier when they're 11. And so, giving them some support, some confidence, how do you do that? How do you teach those students? And so that's another important piece that I think is critical to solving this.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I think in that, I just want to mention in the direction of like the teacher training, Macedonia 2025 is already involved in one project that helps with that. It's in a collaboration with some other organizations. And I think
awesome.
that by now, yeah, I think it is. And I hope we do more there. Yeah. And I'm sure by now we have convinced you that this is, that this is something that's good, that we should be all doing. And I'm thinking a lot of you might be thinking, like, what should I do? Like, what can I do right now? Should I go home, try this out? Should I teach my kids? What's your suggestion, Alice? What should the audience do right after this talk?
Okay, so
or later?
The research says that the #1 thing that you can do for your kid is to tell them they'd be good at it. This is especially true for girls. They're underrepresented in computer science. They're far less likely to have a parent tell them they'd be good at computer science. And it has a huge impact on whether they're willing to study it. So I'd encourage you all to go home, tell your daughter and son that they'd be good at it. And then, if you want to try something, we have this program called the Hour of Code. Nobody's going to learn computer science in an hour. But in 1 hour, you can learn that you can do it. You can build confidence. You can learn that it's fun. You can create your own game or app. This has now been done by 15% of students around the world. And it's available in over 50 languages. It's a great way to get started. And it works for anybody from age 4 to 104, so you can try it right along with your kid. And if they like it, don't stop there. Encourage them to continue to study in school. And if your school does not yet offer computer science or does not offer real computer science classes, talk to the teachers and see if there's a way to support that school to offer higher quality computer science classes.
That sounds great. I mean, this reminds me, I want to share a personal story now because that's something we kind of tried. So my husband Alec, who's sitting here in the audience, he took our daughter, I think she was like 4 at the time. He took her to Google and she tried her first coding class. And then we did a few other coding classes the years after. And guess what? Like 2 summers ago, she came to us asking to spend 3 weeks from the morning till from 7 to 3 at Nintendo, at a girls make games camp. And this is in summer. Like, that's the only time you're guaranteed to get sunshine. I mean, Alice knows. Like, if you're in Seattle, you don't want to be locked in the summer.
You don't.
The whole day. And that happened the year after as well. She spent one summer at Nintendo, one at Microsoft. That worked great. And I know that all of Alice's kids have tried coding as well. And while not all of them may become computer scientists, like her son's been building apps for a couple of years now, and he's
torturing his little sister, apparently. So. And
they're usable apps. And he's like not even 13. But you're listening to this, and you might be thinking, like, we're both computer scientists, our husbands are computer scientists, our kids can do this. I think the real question here is, like, can somebody who is not with computer science background and maybe doesn't have the teacher support, can they do it as well?
Absolutely. So anybody can learn computer science. That is foundational to what we do. And one of our big efforts has been to try to figure out how to get this access to underrepresented minorities in America, to underrepresented populations around the world, and to really give everybody the opportunity to learn and create. The Hour of Code is a great introduction designed completely for beginners. It has been done by, again, people, celebrities, all sorts of people all over the world. We've actually had 10 world leaders do the Hour of Code. We've had Barack Obama, we've had Justin Trudeau, we've had David Cameron. Even the Pope has written a line of code. So this is something anyone can do.
I just want to add to that. That number is 10, but this afternoon that number is going to be 11, because this afternoon we're heading to the office of the Macedonian President Stevo Pendarovski, who will also try to do Hour of Code. So I think for being brave, we should just give him a round of applause right now for trying it out. And I think we want to wrap up with that. So I want to thank you, Alice. This was really a great conversation. And
we have time for questions now?
I just want to...
yeah, we have 10 minutes for questions now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Minutes for questions. So anybody in the crowd that has a question for our panelists, please raise your hand. We've got microphones in the back being ready to pass around.
Got one in the front.
Yeah, there's one.
Thank you for the excellent speech. And you mentioned of age 4. What about from 2 and on?
From 2? Age 2?
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
I have something.
Okay,
I have something. So
Kati has something for age 2.
age 3. We started actually at age 3. There was a game that's a board game, so there's no computer in front of you. It was called Turtle Robots, and actually my nephew Marco was just playing it the other day. Like, I brought it here for him. It's just a board game, and you kind of teach the kids how to make the turtle get to the prize, but they have to program it with little cards ahead of time, and then you execute it for them, so they understand how the logic works. Like, there is no technology, it's really a board game, but the kids get it so quickly, and they start using the language, because it has, like, you start simple, and then you call out a bug, because you're like, oh my god, that's a bug. And then they get it, and then you start making these little routines that you save and repeat. So they get the concepts even though they're not really in front of the computer. But then it's not foreign. You know, once they get on, they're like, okay, I get this. This is just one of these other things. Again, back to the I know what a bone is, I know what a nose is, I know what a bug is.
Yeah, but
And actually, that one's really interesting. I get this question a lot, right? What do you teach kindergartners, like 6-year-olds, about computer science? At that age, what you're learning is computational thinking, right? You know, it doesn't matter what language you're learning. You could learn JavaScript. It'll be out by the time they graduate. Nobody's going to be using this language or that language. You teach an approach to problem solving. And this is different from a lot of what's taught in schools. So some people say, oh, okay, you know, computer science, it sounds like science. It's not, right? Science is about learning how the world works. And a lot of what school does is they give you a problem and there's a right answer and a wrong answer, right? Here's a math problem, let's solve it. Or here's a science experiment we're going to do, and you're going to write a hypothesis, you're going to test it one time, and you're going to write what happened. So it's a one-time thing and it's done. Engineering is about an iterative process where you're building something, you test it, It has bugs. It should have bugs. You've succeeded if it has bugs, right? You find those, you iterate and you make it better. You iterate and you make it better. It's a different approach to solving problems in school than a lot of what school teaches. And what we found is that approach to problem solving, which is core to computer science, you can start that very young. You can teach that a bug is not a bad thing, it's a good thing. We actually have a storybook that we do with the first graders where they're just reading a story where there are bugs and they've got to go find the bugs, and we're trying to make them feel good about that. Like, you spotted a bug. And that's a positive thing, and making them feel good about that. There's research showing that normalizing failure, making that a normal part of the engineering process and feeling good about failure is really key to success at something like engineering. It is also something that women are less likely to have than men. And by normalizing failure as part of the educational system, women are more, they have better attitudes toward computer science, they go further, and they're more successful at it. So this is the kind of thing that we can start even very, very young, is teaching about a different way of thinking about problem solving. Yeah.
So I'm sure there's lots of families, people that have families in this room, and there's a lot of company owners in this room. How do people in Macedonia get set up with code.org to use it?
It's free. You just go to code.org. That's all you have to do. Go ahead. Thanks. Good question, though. I like that.
So, like, you can just go to the site, and there's the hour program, and you can download it, and you can have your kids do it?
Actually, we don't download it, and that was part of making it accessible. We were trying to limit the number of barriers for teachers to be able to teach this, and we found that one of the barriers was just having to download something and install something on all of the computers was hard. So we just made it all available as a website, and if you Google Hour of Code, that's a great place to get started. There are options from us, as well as we've worked with over 200 companies that are all producing computer science curriculum. There are options that work on every single device. There are options that you can download and work offline or online. None of them require a sign-in. They're all, you just try it out. That's all you have to do. Yeah, thanks for queuing me up with a good question.
I can just add to that, as we were speaking about this session and sending the info to Nikita, I think she tried it as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fortunately, I have a daughter that does coding, 13 years old, so yeah, we did it.
Yeah.
Great, and thank you. It's free of charge resources.
Yeah.
Helpful.
I think there's a question in the back there.
Hello, my name is Igor. I am familiar with code.org, and I want to know two things. First is, you mentioned that Macedonia 2025 have some initiative about supporting projects in terms of education in ICT. There are some initiatives in Macedonia that go for coding for kids, especially for Scratch as a platform, and this is focused mainly on the young people. So I would like to know more about what Macedonia 2025 is doing, like supporting initiatives. And the second thing towards Alice, I share the opinion that women should be more involved in the ICT industry. My daughter has 16 years. And she is more into digital art, creating, and she was a part of this global game jam production of. It's an international event that goes once per year, and I try to support her during the time. So I think, in essence, it is lacking the support of society towards. Girls to approach the ICT sector. So I think that kind of activities should be more and more into that. And I just want to mention, my wife has a company. It's called edufront.mk, and she started education for small children based on Scratch and Harvard's curriculum for education?
That's amazing. I love it.
Great question.
Yeah. I love Scratch. Scratch is fantastic, and Scratch is actually, there are 2 great hour of code activities on Scratch, which is a great way to get started. I would say, you know, for women, I do think that's a challenge. It's a challenge we see around the world, and starting with education and starting in part of primary and secondary school is a great way to engage women. We, at Code.org, in America, right now, we see that only less than a fifth of students graduating from university are female in computer science. So there's a real gender gap there, and we're missing out on a huge percentage of our workforce and people who could be a part of this.
I see that at the workplace as well. I mean, oftentimes I'm the only woman in the room.
Yeah.
Typical thing.
But I have positive news here. So we're only 6 years old as an organization. And we have seen, you know, we have about 40% of schools in America are using our technology, and in America we see that the percentage of women in our courses is almost 50%. And so, you know, there's other work that needs to happen. This won't solve the problem by itself. There's work that needs to happen in technology. There's work that needs to happen in hiring and retention and how companies do this. But it's a critical component is bringing both women and men into, you know, with these skills so that they can join the conversation and be a part of it. I love that your wife is doing something with Scratch with kids, as young kids. That's fantastic. And you know, if you want to talk about Macedonia 2025.
Yeah, go briefly, yes.
Yeah.
So Macedonia 2025, like even like before this conversation, was involved in a smaller project that's about training teachers. And with this, we want to bring more the awareness of this, because we feel that the way we talk about, again, like when we talk about economic development, we talk a lot about getting into the EU. We talk about a lot of things that are related to what's outside. And this is really talking about what can we do inside that can really make a big difference and can create prosperity. So I think that our first step is just really talking about this. And obviously in the future, we want to do more. We want to engage more.
Yeah, and I love that you guys are doing teacher training as the effort, because I feel like that's what we see as the critical component that schools need.
Yeah. Yes, I think we have to wrap up then.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. One last round of applause to the group. Thank you.
Thank you.